What if I told you the secrets behind one of the greatest minds of our time aren't found in textbooks, documentaries, or billionaire interviews, but in 10 lesser-known, powerful stories that reveal how Bill Gates actually thinks? Not stories about Microsoft's IPO, not stories about Harvard dropout cliches. These are the real stories. The ones that show how he solves problems, how he builds teams, how he plays the long game. So if you want to understand the mind of a genius, stay with me. Because once you hear these 10 stories, you'll never look at Bill Gates the same way again. Number 1. The startup before Microsoft. Trafo Data. Before the world ever heard the name Microsoft, there were two teenagers tinkering in a garage chasing an idea no one else saw. It was the early 1970s. Bill Gates and Paul Allen, barely out of high school, weren't dreaming of changing the world yet. They were obsessed with something much simpler: traffic data. Back then, cities measured road traffic using air tubes. Yes, tubes stretched across the road that made clicks every time a car passed by. Those clicks were recorded on long strips of punched paper tape. Now imagine this: stacks of paper full of holes, thousands of them, and some poor city engineer had to sit down and manually decode all of it just to figure out how many cars passed by on a Tuesday afternoon. Gates and Allen looked at this mess and thought, why can't a computer do this? So they teamed up with a friend, Paul Gilbert, and built their first startup, Trafo Data. Their idea was bold for the time: a small computer that could read that punch tape and spit out clean, readable reports for engineers. Now, sounds simple today, but back then, they were writing code by hand, soldering circuit boards in garages, and literally feeding traffic tapes into machines they built from scratch. And the result? Well, Trafo Data failed. The machine had glitches, the market wasn't ready, local governments didn't bite. But here's the twist. That failure? It was their first real-world education. They learned how to build hardware. They learned how to write software. They learned how to sell an idea. And most importantly, they learned how to work together. Because just a few years later, that same team, Gates and Allen, would go on to build Microsoft, turning everything they learned from Trafo Data into something that would change the world. Trafo Data didn't make them millionaires, but it made them ready. Number 2, the pancake problem. Everyone knows Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard to build Microsoft, but almost no one talks about what he did while he was still there. And what he did was solve pancakes. Oh, really? At Harvard, in the middle of his computer science and math classes, Gates stumbled onto a problem that had nothing to do with software and everything to do with breakfast. It was called the pancake sorting problem. Here's how it works. Imagine you've got a messy stack of pancakes. Each pancake is a different size, some small, some massive, and they're all jumbled up. Now here's the twist. You're only allowed to use a spatula, and you can stick it under any pancake and flip the whole section above it. Your goal? Sort them so the biggest pancake is on the bottom and the smallest one on top, using the fewest flips possible. Sounds silly, right? But this problem had stumped mathematicians for years. It's one of those puzzles that seems easy until you try to crack it. That's exactly why Bill Gates became obsessed with it. Working alongside his Harvard professor, Christos Papadimitriou, Gates dove deep into the math. Night after night, he worked through combinations, tested theories, and hunted for patterns. And then they found it. A more efficient algorithm, a smarter way to solve the pancake problem than anyone had discovered before. In 1979, Gates and Papadimitriou published their work in a paper titled Bounds for Sorting by Prefix Reversal. And for the next 30 years, no one in the world came up with a better solution. Let that sink in. Before he ever sold a line of software, before Microsoft took over the world, Bill Gates had already etched his name into the world of theoretical mathematics. Not with code, not with business, but with pancakes. And that is the kind of mind that doesn't just build companies, it builds solutions where nobody even thought to look. Number 3, the call that changed a life. In the early days of Microsoft, when the company was growing fast and the tech world was still finding its feet, Bill Gates was already playing a very different kind of game. He wasn't just building software, he was building a team, and he knew that would make or break the company. But here's the twist. He didn't leave that to HR. He took it personally. One evening, a brilliant young student was sitting in her dorm room, caught between multiple summer internship offers. She had options, big names in tech, including Microsoft. But nothing was final yet. And then her phone rang. "Hi, this is Bill Gates." She froze. The Bill Gates? CEO of Microsoft? No way. Convinced it was a prank, she laughed it off, politely ended the call, and thought, "Nice try, whoever you are." The next day, still a little amused, she walked into her university's career center and casually mentioned the weird call. The counselor looked stunned. "That was Bill Gates," they said. "He really did call you." She couldn't believe it. The head of Microsoft, one of the most important people in tech, took the time to personally reach out to her. No recruiter, no form email, just a direct call from the top. That one act of personal effort flipped everything. She immediately called back and accepted the offer. Because when someone like Bill Gates makes you feel that important, you don't say no. And that's the secret a lot of leaders miss. Talent isn't just attracted to perks or paychecks. They're attracted to people who care. Gates knew that building a company wasn't just about writing great code. It was about finding great people, one call at a time. Number 4, the war room. Walk into a Microsoft meeting room in the 1980s, and you'd feel it instantly. Pressure, debate, fire. This wasn't some cozy corporate brainstorm with coffee and polite nods. This was intellectual warfare. And right in the middle of it all, Bill Gates. Young, brilliant, and brutally demanding. He had one rule. If your idea can't survive being torn apart in this room, it won't survive the real world. Developers would show up with project updates or new concepts, hoping to impress, but Bill, he didn't hand out praise easily. In fact, he had a different tactic. Some called it negative praise. He'd lean back in his chair, arms crossed, listen carefully, then boom, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And yes, sometimes with an F-bomb or two thrown in. But here's the part outsiders never understood. He wasn't attacking you. He was attacking the idea, relentlessly with everything he had. Because if you could survive the fire, if you stood your ground, if you defended your idea with logic and clarity, you earned something priceless. His respect. You see, Gates didn't waste time tearing down bad ideas from people he didn't believe in. If he challenged you, it meant he saw potential. And he expected you to rise to the level he knew you were capable of. It was intense. It was confrontational. It wasn't for everyone. But that furnace, it forged some of the sharpest minds in tech history and built the foundation for Microsoft's early dominance. Because to Gates, every feature, every product, every line of code had to be battle-tested. And the battlefield was the meeting room.
5. The parking lot. In the early days of Microsoft, there were no fancy titles, no private jets, no corporate retreats. Just a young, relentless founder, Bill Gates, working day and night to build a company that didn't even exist yet in most people's minds. But Gates wasn't just writing code. He was watching, always watching. From his modest office window, he had a clear view of the parking lot. And he began doing something that employees would later describe as strange. He memorized their license plates. Every single one. He knew who arrived early, who left late, who worked weekends, and who didn't. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't micromanagement. It was obsession. Because for Bill, building Microsoft wasn't just a job. It was his mission, his war, his identity. Every hour mattered. Every line of code counted. And if he was pulling all-nighters, sleeping on beanbags, skipping holidays, he expected you to match that fire. He didn't need timesheets. He didn't send reminder emails. He just knew. If the lot was half empty when it shouldn't be, if a car disappeared earlier than usual, he noticed. And yet, this wasn't about control. It was about culture. Startups weren't glamorous back then. They were raw, brutal, personal. And this was a message. I'm watching because I care. And because I'm in this just as deep as you are, maybe deeper. That obsessive energy, the kind most people would never tolerate, was the same force that fueled Microsoft's rise from a garage-sized dream to a global giant. Because Gates didn't just build a company. He built a furnace, and then lived inside it.
These 5 stories already reveal how Bill Gates built one of the most powerful minds in modern history, but we're just halfway there. In part 2, you'll see how his obsession with code, his game-like habits, and his mindset for solving global problems shaped the rest of his journey. So make sure to watch part 2. It's linked right here on the screen and in the description. Trust me, you don't want to miss the second half.